Because both of you are OGs and well established in this community, I wanted to make sure you had welcome music to come on. So I hope that really got us started off here well. But nonetheless, Ryan of Masari, one of the best research, if not the best research groups in the game. Meltem, OGs of OGs, aspiring cult leader, as well as we discussed behind the green scenes. So much knowledge between the two of you and this entire space and its history as well. I want to start off and talk about post halving and the last 4 months. We had the halving happen just about 4 days ago, 5 days ago now. We have seen mining fees the highest they have ever been across Bitcoin in 15 years. Runes went live. We've got 12 plus token experiments. Memes on Bitcoin are now a thing. We've got a brand new BIP that has just been proposed, and a ton more that has happened again in a simple 4 months. What is on both of your radars looking ahead at the next 3 to 6 months across the Bitcoin space? Ryan, let's start with you.
Well, thanks for having me. It's exciting. I kind of feel like I was talking to one of our analysts earlier, and it almost feels like we finally arrived at a moment for Bitcoin that is 8 years after I mid-curved the Ethereum launch. And back then, my general thinking was the EVM was terrific, but why would you need a new native token, right? And so it was almost like the Bitcoin maximalist equivalent of blockchain, not Bitcoin, in terms of how do you extend functionality and get it more Turing complete system that would power a bunch of applications, but just use the Bitcoin network and use something like a side chain or a layer of Bitcoin. And that was at the time when we had the scaling wars. It's safe to say the Bitcoin code base was thoroughly ossified. And in the last year or so, we've really seen a resurgence driven, I think, more by the recognition that we're going to need a vibrant fee market and some other applications that will drive fees in order to make the core Bitcoin use of store of value sustainable, because we need mining to be sustainable and we need to be able to move away from the subsidy. So not overnight, but with each halving, I think the need gets more acute, and the realization, I think, starts to set in amongst the community that this is something that should be invested in and is going to need to happen for Bitcoin's long-term security model to work. And what we've seen post-halving is, I'm not sure if it's persisted, but at least there was something like 100 consecutive blocks where fees were greater than the subsidy. In the first quarter of the year, fees were about 6.5% of the subsidy, and obviously with the halving, that you can extrapolate that at least doubles. So you're now talking about fees being a sustainably higher percentage of the network level mining rewards. And when I think about the evolution of applications and whether it's runes or lightning finally taking off or stacks, whatever it is there going to be value accrual in the Bitcoin ecosystem that's going to lead to fees that will go to the miners in order to sustain this proof of work operation that undergirds the entire apparatus? So I think that's the one I'm keeping the closest eye on, and ideally, even if those fees are volatile, you'd expect them to smooth out over time. And as long as they're consistently higher, and it feels like there's some staying power there, I think that's the healthiest thing for the long term of the network, and probably the trend to keep the closest eye on.
Meltem.
Yeah, so I think Ryan kind of gave a great overview. Masari is, by the way, the best research platform in the space. I say this as an investor in Masari and a longtime co-conspirator of Ryan's. We started our crypto careers together at DCG. So Ryan and I have had many zesty arguments over the years, late nights, arguing about random Bitcoin stuff. I think one of the interesting things, so I think Ryan gave a great synopsis of what's happening, the narrative unfolding within the Bitcoin ecosystem. But as we saw, I caught the tail end of the last panel where there's a great question, like, is Solana potentially Bitcoin L2, right? I think one of the things we're seeing as well, just kind of zooming out and looking at the broader crypto ecosystem, I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist per se, but I'm a Bitcoin believer, right? I don't know what you would call it. Like, Bitcoin is my first love. Bitcoin is my truest love. I think what we're starting to see that's really fascinating to me is as more and more people come into the crypto ecosystem, right? You have people who came in during the years of Bitcoin, which includes people like Ryan and myself. Like we remember the block size wars, the scaling wars. Then you have the Ethereum sort of generation who came in during 2017, 2018, ICOs, enterprise Ethereum, like consortium kind of approaches. Then we had the DeFi, like script kiddies who came in, not to be pejorative, right? But there was a lot of copy pasta and it was great. It brought a lot of people into the ecosystem. Now we have a whole new wave of people who are coming in and their first interaction isn't with Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's with Solana or Sui or Aptos. And that's a totally different user experience. So it's been interesting to see as more people come into the crypto ecosystem via these various routes. One thing I've been fascinated by is how people all go through the same sort of learning cycle where you get involved in a new ecosystem, doesn't really matter what ecosystem it is. At the end of the day, all roads lead back to Bitcoin. There's something beautiful and pristine about Bitcoin, about the creation of Bitcoin, no pre-mine, the economics of Bitcoin, the thermodynamics, the physics of the Bitcoin network, and proof of work, which has been much maligned, but I think is just incredibly unique and incredibly potent and powerful in a world where we see these abstractions that kind of move us away from the world of atoms and energy, right? And so I think Bitcoin, in a way, is sort of having this resurgence of interest because as people create wealth in these other parts of the crypto ecosystem or go down this philosophical rabbit hole, they're sort of coming back to Bitcoin and how elegant and graceful Bitcoin is in its design, in its social scalability, just like all of these things about Bitcoin that are really powerful, really unique, and make it really, really it's the king of crypto, right? There's nothing like it. There will never be anything like Bitcoin in my view. And so what it does is it's creating this interesting dynamic where people are looking at Bitcoin. The question I ask myself, right, is, okay, if I were an AI agent, what currency would I want to earn? Well, I don't want dollars, right? Because the dollar is melting faster than an ice cube. So no, thank you. I don't want a centralized a cryptocurrency where the supply is sort of controlled and the issuance is driven by, you know, this oligopoly basically on chain. Bitcoin really, to me, is like the most logical currency that our AI overlords and our robot friends would want because it's money backed by physics. And if you have all the knowledge of, you know, the universe, all the catalog knowledge of the, I should say Earth, right? Not the universe, but if you have all the knowledge of Earth, like cataloged and you can access it, you would probably choose money that's backed by thermodynamics and physics. So to me, Bitcoin's having this really interesting resurgence, and it's so fun for me seeing people from outside the Bitcoin ecosystem who viewed, to Ryan's point, Bitcoin as an ossified protocol, Bitcoin as a space where there's no innovation, sort of circling back to Bitcoin and saying, wait a minute, there's something really unique here. And what we're starting to see now is, I think, specification. Different protocols are really good for different things. So Ryan's point around the fee subsidy, I'm not sure that the fee subsidy increasing is necessarily helpful to driving more use cases and more adoption of Bitcoin. But I think what it does is it starts to create an awareness that maybe, like some of the other protocols we're seeing, Bitcoin needs to evolve where instead of being monolithic, right, it becomes more modular and more composable, where there's more specification as to what's happening on different layers of the protocol. And I think Stacks has really been ahead of the curve here. That's why I'm excited about, you know, being a part of the Stacks ecosystem and being on the board of the Stacks Foundation. Is we're starting to migrate kind of to this worldview and an emergent consensus that Bitcoin can and should become more modular. And I think that opens up a really exciting new design space. I know it's a contentious one, but I think there is growing awareness that Bitcoin becoming more modular does not detract from the value proposition of layer one Bitcoin. It doesn't in any way, you know, damage, I think, the incredible staying power and potency of Bitcoin layer one. What I think it does is it creates more ways for value accrual to happen and stay within the Bitcoin ecosystem versus leaking out to all of these other ecosystems. So I'm really excited about the fact that Bitcoiners and non-Bitcoiners alike are getting more excited about these new emergent use cases and these new modular approaches to building on top of Bitcoin. And the second thing I'll just quickly add is greed is the flywheel that fuels the crypto economy. And I know it's really controversial. A lot of people are like, oh, speculation is bad. Like, we're now going to do real use cases. No, speculation is the first use case. It is an incredible use case. It is the flywheel that has gotten us to where we are. We literally memed a global reserve currency into existence through human greed. Simple, beautiful, elegant. Bitcoiners want to have fun. Like, I want to speculate. I want to buy, I don't know, Wenko Menko or Pups or whatever it might. Like, it's fun to speculate with your friends in the Sky Casino. So while these things may feel silly and feel like toys, I think at their core, what they're revealing is the laser-eyed orange, like, maxi cult. It's very exclusive. There's purity tests all the time. It's ridiculous. People want to have fun. Like, the whole point of permissionless innovation is you should be able to do what you want. And right now, the world's kind of dark. If people want to buy shit coins on Bitcoin with their friends, let them. Like, just let them. It's a beautiful thing. So that's my take.
Ryan, anything to add? I got a question for Melton, but anything to add onto that? There was a ton of threads to go down there, but anything to add?
Greed, for lack of a better word, is good. I'm just literally reading and smiling the Gordon Gekko speech from Wall Street that Melton just articulated and re-summarized for the crypto generation. So, yeah, I think it's good. I think the only thing that I would add is, to be clear, I agree with Melton. I don't think that just because the subsidy gets cut in half that fees magically go up. You're pushing on a string if you think that's going to happen. I think it needs to be pulled. And my point, and I think Melton would agree with this, is that the need destroys some of those artificial constraints that have typically existed within the Bitcoin community, because now there is a need to evolve and there is a need to invest in infrastructure that will support a fee-based economy and applications around Bitcoin. So I think there's a little bit of nuance there. I don't want that comment to be perceived as like my version of the rainbow chart, where like, oh, the halving happens, so price doubles, right? Like that's not how this works. Folks. But I do think that it wakes more people up that are serious builders in the Bitcoin community, that if we want to preserve this experiment and kind of keep this really important societal innovation, even more so than a technical innovation, alive, and this social experiment alive and well, is going to need to be economically sustainable. And this is going to be the best way to drive that forward.
And with modularity, Melton, you mentioned this might be a little controversial around modularity coming to the Bitcoin technical stack, and that it's necessary. Why so controversial, but also why do we need it as well?
Okay, so I think one of the challenges with monolithic architectures is they become very brittle. And we've seen this with Bitcoin Core, right? Like, Bitcoin Core in some ways is very brittle and very hard to work on. As a result, I have pulled up, so I'm looking at the big screen, the good screen over here. I have pulled up the Electric Capital Developer Report, right? And they have done a great job. Maria Shen there, shout out to Maria. She's done a great job tracking activity in different GitHub repos. Bitcoin developer activity has been down, right? In Q4 of 2023, Bitcoin developer activity and active Bitcoin developers contributing to Bitcoin Core GitHub repo declined, I believe, by about 18%. Okay, that's not good. You need devs building on Bitcoin. And the issue is when people come and they bring their BIPs to Bitcoin, right? And today, actually, or yesterday, we have new BIP approvers for Bitcoin. Lalu is one of them, which, like, super excited about. Lalu, for those who don't know, is CTO of Lightning Labs, brilliant Bitcoin dev, really pushing the envelope, I think, of innovation on top of Bitcoin. Another one is Kanzer Brian, also like fantastic, has been in the Bitcoin ecosystem a long time. But again, like, it's really, really difficult when devs can't build on top of Bitcoin and when there's a general culture that's anti-innovation. And I think what's exciting about modularity is it doesn't require any changes to the base protocol. What it does, it allows people to pursue different threads that are complementary to Bitcoin without relying on this dependence of getting BIPs through the BIP process, right? And even if BIPs do get to through the BIP process, like we saw with segue it, like then you're dependent on businesses and miners to implement these upgrades, and sometimes they don't want to do that. So the politics of Bitcoin sometimes get in the way, and when you build kind of this monolithic architecture, there's not a lot of flexibility. So what I like about the modularity approach is like, let 1,000 flowers bloom, let people build, and then let Mr. Market decide what's actually valuable, right? And what's beautiful about Bitcoin is the way Mr. Market decides what's valuable is this beautiful balance between the economics of what miners are willing to support, the economics of what investors and people investing in sort of these upgrades are willing to pay for, right? And what the market ultimately decides is valuable. So I think it's really important. The other thing I'll just add is I also just think we're so early in this experiment. We can't really afford to have these sacred cows. So I'm just excited about seeing more developers coming into Bitcoin, feeling welcomed, but also being able to program in different languages, right? There's only one reference implementation for Bitcoin. Why is that? Like this inflexibility kind of needs to go. We can have it at one layer of the stack, but there's nothing preventing people from building around sort of Bitcoin base layer. So I'm excited. Again, I just think that stigma's been removed, and big shout out to Udi and Eric with what they did with Taproot Wizards and what they have been doing, sort of pushing the envelope and trying to make Bitcoin fun again. It's a big cultural shift. And I think that cultural shift has led to a resurgence of developers coming back to Bitcoin now and saying, okay, maybe it is okay to build here.
And it was the announcement of
there's another simple tailwind as well that I think is going to naturally help this process. Everything that we're talking about from an infrastructure standpoint above the core Bitcoin repo and these other layers, that's great, and I think that extends the ecosystem and is probably the primary development that most people have been talking about. But even when it comes to the core, the tailwind that I think might be most important right now is just that fake Satoshi, that son of a bitch, has been like intimidating devs for basically 6 years. He's been completely destroyed in the courts. And I'm not going to say his name, mostly because I don't feel like we should give him the SEO anymore. I'm American, so I can call him fake Satoshi if I want to. But I think that having that out of the equation is going to let people like Lalu and Brian and folks that really were early come back in a more prominent way. And I would expect that to be the tip of the spear, right? Because people underestimate how damaging those lawsuits were and that campaign of fear and intimidation. And that is a massive, massive unlock as we think about ossifying, right? Like the Bitcoin, code base in a productive way, not in a way that makes it less stable, but one that just makes it a little bit more flexible because you have the best and some of the earliest minds back in the game without having this, fear of reprisal hanging over their head.
Yeah, that guy sucks.
And to Melton's point earlier too, this is an experiment right now. We are still so early. 15 years for technical advancement and economy and platform that we've built as a collective here is a short amount of time. But even more so on the Bitcoin side, 4 months. 4 months, most of this innovation we're talking about today, we're talking about on this panel, has all come to light. That is a very short amount of time to see
I don't
things.
think 4 months is true. Hold on. I'm just going to throw like a caveat out there. People have been working on that for years and years, right? If I think back to what people are doing now, like Ryan, you and I, were making the rounds in Silicon Valley back in 2015. People were working on colored coins. People were working on smart contracts on Bitcoin. It is just like people talk about the culture war all the time, right? And woke culture. Bitcoin has a culture war problem. Bitcoin went through its own decade-long culture war that was really toxic, really wasted a ton of productive intellectual capital from really brilliant people. Like there's no room for that in tech, And this is why I think cults are so interesting. If you want to be in a cult and you belong to a religious sect, great. But at the end of the day, we have something called freedom of religion in this country and many countries around the world. Let the people decide, let the market decide. The one thing I will also add, this is what I'm riffing on now and excited about, is Bitcoin has had a tangible impact on the shape of our physical world. Bitcoin has birthed $100 billion dedicated hardware and data center industry. And I'm going to say something that I think is a little bit controversial, but I don't think the AI compute boom that we've seen would be as big as it has been and as prolific as it has been without many of the innovations we've seen coming from Bitcoin mining, sort of Bitcoin physical infrastructure space, and from the incredible amount of capital that has gone into physical infrastructure to support the Bitcoin network. A lot of the models.
It's going to be lovely and wild watching all of the AI boosters who are otherwise very green and and of a certain political persuasion suddenly dance and do a complete 180 on Bitcoin's energy consumption because they realize that AI is going to be an order of magnitude more of an energy hog. They're going to need that expertise from the Bitcoin miners, to Melton's point, to tackle some of these challenges. So I think, on the hardware side and the software side, it's crypto and AI are going to go hand in hand in more ways than one.
And Melton, what are you excited about in the physical space? I was reading some of your tweets about how the Bitcoin ecosystem is going to drive so much innovation, not just at the software level, but the physical level. You're talking about data centers. Paint us a picture. What does this look like? What are you excited about in the next 12 months and maybe further that we can expect from this?
Look, I think that the word of the decade is modularity. What I think is really exciting is these principles around modularity and composability that have emerged in the crypto space. And I have to give Ethereum its flowers, right? Like a lot of this has come from the Ethereum ecosystem and innovators there. So we have these approaches to make software modular and composable, which I think has created and fostered this incredibly rich and vibrant, primarily DeFi ecosystem. And now we're moving like to these other sort of categories. We've seen the same thing on the physical infrastructure side with Bitcoin. What we've seen is data centers becoming modular, right? So you have these containerized data centers that people are hauling out to different places where they can consume last mile power in places where there is no natural power consumer, but a lot of generation. You see this happening on the thermodynamics side, right? People are creating solutions that allow you to monetize the heat created from Bitcoin mining. We're seeing this in the way people are laying out and thinking of constructing data centers. We're even seeing this like on the battery and generation side, where we're keeping older facilities online longer, whether those are nuclear plants, thermo plants. We have a couple in Kentucky, there's a couple of hydro plants that have been able to stay online because people are pulling up literally containerized Bitcoin mining plants. They're now doing this with AI data centers. So this idea, right, that composable modular architecture is the future is now also moving into the physical infra space. And again, this is what I'm spending my time on. Now, the thing we're going to need is open source protocols and sort of like an OSINT architecture for how the physical infrastructure ties to like the operating systems and payment and settlement architecture. That is something that crypto protocols are uniquely enabled to do. Again, we don't necessarily need Bitcoin base layer for that. That's where, again, building more composable modular architecture on Bitcoin itself is also an incredible enabler to sort of bridging this gap between all of this physical infrastructure that needs to get built to power insatiable demand for computation and storage and connectivity, while also sort of balancing some of the unique economic constraints that exist. Like our government is bankrupt, right? We can't put enough transmission lines on the grid. It's simply too expensive. What people don't know is the electricity price you pay, over half of that today doesn't pay for generation. It pays for transmission and distribution. It's just not viable, right? Like the centralized, super modular, like archaic architecture for physical infrastructure is not sustainable. So this is where I think like borrowing from Bitcoin and the tremendous innovation we've seen on the physical infrastructure side, because in Bitcoin, electrons and atoms matter. Other protocols don't have like such a strong dependence on the laws of thermodynamics. So sorry, I'm nerding out here. I get very excited about this, but I think that's tremendously exciting. And then bringing physical infrastructure assets on chain, I think is what the next decade is going to be all about. That's what I'm focused on right now.
No, you have nothing to apologize about. You are with two other nerds on this panel who would probably nerd out for another hour with you about this if we had the time. So thank you, Melton. Ryan, come to you real quick on the L2 side, layer twos. There are now over 50 different L2s, and I'm underestimating that right now. And how they may define themselves, we'll get into. But really, from you and the Messari team, how are you looking at the Bitcoin L2 space as this has rapidly evolved over the last year and a half, going from the core 4, Lightning, Stacks, Rootstock, Liquid, to then about a dozen others to now seeing over 50. How are you guys looking at this space?
Well, I mean, honestly, I'd encourage people to follow Red on our team. If you're looking for really good Bitcoin research, particularly on the L2 and all these other projects, including Stacks, which he covers for our team as well. I think he's probably the expert here, and I'll essentially just plagiarize him. He gave a presentation earlier this week that I think is going to hold up pretty well. And his point is many of what people are calling layer twos are not actually layer twos because they don't enable unilateral exits. So Lightning is an L2, but maybe Stacks, Rootstock, Core, Liquid, et cetera, are not necessarily. But I think we're getting closer to seeing the ability to actually seamlessly move into different layers of Bitcoin and with some of the emerging projects. So for the nuances of that answer and kind of where the puck is going, I'll kind of defer a much longer answer to Red and some of the analysts that we have internally that have been looking deeply at this.
Awesome. Since I'm the host, I get to control a little bit of this time, so we're going to go over a little bit. It is Bitcoin season 2, as it has been defined across crypto Twitter. But to both of your comments, this development has been going on for more than 15 years, and we'll look to continue for that. As we enter into this next chapter of Bitcoin, what are you both very excited about looking ahead in the summer? We've got Nakamoto that will be released. Again, we've got upgrades that just came from Rootstock. We've got plenty of mainnets that are going to come on chain as well. What has you excited about Bitcoin season 2? Ryan, and then Melvin, I want to finish on you because I know you got something you're holding. Ryan, what are you excited about Bitcoin season 2?
I'm excited for how hated all of the applications that come out this year are going to be, because I think there's a lot of hype. And I think the infrastructure development is critical, as I mentioned in my first answer. But we're going to find out pretty quickly that compared to Ethereum and its roll-up centric design, compared to Solana, which has gone through its rolling pains, and some of the alt V1s, some of these applications are going to underperform, I think, pretty significantly. And you're going to see one of the most hated rallies and hype cycle, little mini hype cycles in the Bitcoin infrastructure space, I think, over the summer, where enthusiasm for the long-term thesis way out kicks the actual usefulness or performance of some of what's built on top. So that is to say, I expect, just like all of the other hype cycles that have been overlapping in crypto, this to be no different, and you'll see a lot of crap, but ultimately, a dozen or so kind of core projects that really stand out and make it through whatever the next winter is, and ultimately come out the other side in 5-10 years being really important bits of the industry apparatus.
Elton.
Okay, so I shared this link in the chat. L2.watch, WATCH, is a great website sort of aggregating all of the different things happening on top of Bitcoin. Last summer, I was hanging out with Idan Yago, who built Sovereign, which is a DeFi protocol on top of Bitcoin using Rootstock. And I think there were like 6 or 7 things we talked about in terms of Bitcoin innovation. Now this list is 70 things, and I feel like there's something new getting added every day. I have no idea what's going on, and I feel like I'm pretty plugged in. So yeah, kudos to Ryan's research analyst. Like, he's a very busy person. And you're lucky to have a great research analyst. I wish I had that. I will just pay for Masari instead. Pumping my bags here. Love to see it. But look, I think what's been really interesting to see is there's a ton of people building on Bitcoin. They have a new energy. They're not jaded. Some of them have been through a few cycles. Some of them haven't. A lot of this stuff won't ship for a while. It's like anything else. It's of dubious quality. Some stuff definitely looks and feels like vaporware, and some stuff is really technically robust, but I'm not sure how easy it will be to build an ecosystem around some of these protocols because they're complicated. Like, building on Bitcoin is kind of complicated, it's kind of tough. UX on Bitcoin is still really rough. I was trying to trade runes earlier this week, and I got a little pop-up message that was like, hey, you will lose all your money if you trade runes. And it's like, that's not great. So I think there's still a lot of work to be done. It's like very early, very nascent. So for me, what I get excited about, the reason I kind of refer to myself as an aspiring cult leader is like, at the end of the day, I think what makes crypto ecosystems successful is the energy and sort of like the human capital around them. And I think this is why I'm excited that there's so much more human capital coming to Bitcoin. There's attention, there's enthusiasm. Like people want to spend their time and energy building the Bitcoin ecosystem, which is something we haven't had in a long time. And it's not because of some like puritanical, dogmatic religious belief. It's because they're having fun. They see the potential for profit. And I think there are things they can build that are like innovative and unique in some capacity. And so I think Bitcoin culture is something I'm really like interested to see how it develops and evolves going forward. We talk a lot about like Eternal September, right? Which is the story of Usenet. Like every September, students go to college, have what internet access at college campuses. So every September, there's like this resetting of cultural norms in the community. We always talk about Bitcoin's Eternal September moment, right? Like, I think it's about to happen again, big time, with all these new devs coming in who are like, rules, like F your rules. I'm going to just build things and ship things. So yeah, more power to the builders, power to the culture creators, and like make Bitcoin fun again. Give me memes, give me meme coins, give me silly toys. That's what excites people. We need an inherently optimistic vision, and like the vision of a digital gulag where only people who own Bitcoin are going to have any human rights. Like that's not inspiring. That is fundamentally nihilistic and like really fucked up. I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in a world where Michael Saylor tells me what I can and can't do because he has the most Bitcoins. Like that's weird. That's a weird vision for your utopia. It's not compelling. No, no disrespect to Saylor, but like let's have a more optimistic vision for the future that's fun and inspiring, where people have like the ability to do things and build things and enjoy like freedoms that we have in the Western world, you know? So yeah, I just think Bitcoin culture's evolving, needs to evolve. And this whole really strange vision of the world where like Bitcoin is the only asset that and only whole coin. People are like talking about how only whole coiners will be able to like afford a decent quality of life. I'm like, that is not how you bring people into your cult. That's like, that's weird. That's a weird thing to say. It's like a really strange elitist approach and is really off-putting. So I'm just happy that that's sort of dying out. They can go have their own little cult in the corner. But I want to make a big umbrella and I want everyone to come join. And I don't care what you think about Bitcoin. If you want to build on Bitcoin, if you want to build culture on Bitcoin, if you want to do weird shit on Bitcoin, like come hang. That's always been the beauty of crypto culture. And I just think like it's high time that Bitcoin goes that direction. I feel like that's coming back. It's exciting. Let's have a more exciting, compelling, inclusive vision for the future of Bitcoin.
I think to put this in chart form, you've got the current Bitcoin culture, which is at the top of the bell curve, and the screaming, crying Saylor maximalists. And again, no disrespect to Saylor. I wouldn't call him mid because he figured out a game to essentially borrow shitcoin dollars to load up his personal Bitcoin stash. But there is like an undercurrent of that maximalism that I think is very mid. And ultimately they're the underperformers versus the two outliers. So you've got monkeys and wizards and Udi's, camp and Eric Wall, who literally dress up as a wizard for conferences and say things that are more insightful and incisive than anyone that's writing a book on Bitcoin.
No more
70
Bitcoin.
And then yes. And then on the other hand, you've got the 130 IQ, plus developers that are coming back to Bitcoin Core that are building this infrastructure. So I agree that like the culture is the 70, the development at the other layers in the core repo is the 130. And, for the time being, I think those cultists have a role, but that's not ultimately where the puck is going if we want to get to the next level for Bitcoin adoption.
Agreed. And we're looking forward to your end of the year crypto thesis as well, that you and the entire Messari team put together and drop at the end of the year. So looking forward to December just for that. And to Meltem's point, let's make Bitcoin fun again and let's keep it that way as well. Meltem, Ryan, thank you both very much. Again, we could go on for another hour, but thank you for sharing the thoughts and insights today.
Thanks, Kyle.